This is the moment an explosion ripped through a Taiwan department store.
Today, Taiwan Semiconductor is announcing that they will be investing at least $100 billion.
U.S. President Donald Trump has unveiled sweeping global tariffs.
An animated mock-up of NVIDIA's new Taiwan office comes from outer space.
Taiwan continues to see a surge in Chinese military activity. President Lai Ching-te has vowed to put out a special budget to increase Taiwan's defense spending.
And I will faithfully execute.
One of the biggest recall efforts in democratic history.
A steady flow of people coming in and out of this school here in Taipei, which is now a polling station.
24 KMT lawmakers' seats were put to a recall vote on Saturday. All of them failed.
The main opposition Kuomintang has officially selected its new leader.
Taiwan People's Party founder Ko Wen-je is leaving detention.
Pope Francis, the 266th leader of a Roman Catholic Church, has died in the Vatican City on Easter Monday.
Taiwanese actress Barbie Hsu has died at age 48.
The skies in Taipei may be cloudy, but here in the heart of the city, it's all rainbows as Taiwan's annual Pride Parade gets underway.
2025年威廉波特世界冠军世界少棒锦标赛，丰原国小台湾之光。
Hello and welcome to Correspondents, where we go above and beyond the headlines with journalists here in Taiwan and across the region. I'm Andrew Ryan. With just weeks left before 2025 draws to a close, we're taking a look at some of the biggest stories that shaped Taiwan this year. From tariffs, arguably Taiwan's buzzword of 2025, to cross-strait tensions and dramatic developments in domestic politics. It's been a year packed with defining moments. And now, joining us in the studio to help us recap the whirlwind year that was 2025 are Brian Hioe, editor of New Bloom, an online magazine covering politics and youth culture in Taiwan and the Asia-Pacific region, and Leslie Liao from TaiwanPlus, our lead anchor and reporter. Thank you both for joining me today. Now we begin with one of the most consequential moments of the year, not just for Taiwan, but also for the world, the inauguration of US President Donald Trump.
That I will faithfully execute.
The office of President of the United States.
The office of President of the United States.
A solemn oath as Donald J. Trump is sworn in as the 47th President of the United States. Tens of thousands of people have lined up on the streets of D.C. braving frigid temperatures to attend and witness Donald Trump's inauguration at the Capital One Arena over there. The line starts on this side of the street, goes down that way, and snakes all the way around. There's a sense of excitement here.
Now, Leslie, you were in Washington, D.C. reporting on the inauguration. Tell us about the mood in the Capitol.
One fascinating thing that I thought, that I realized when we were there and speaking to the supporters, was that they really believed in him and they showed up in droves, and everyone was extremely optimistic about his second term. And that was me going in as maybe an outsider from someone from Taiwan, and I guess there was a bit more anxiety on the Taiwanese side about, what a Trump term might mean for Taiwan. Now, the first Trump administration, there was a lot of positivity around Trump, at least from the Taiwanese side. During his first inauguration there, he picked up the phone from then President Tsai Ing-wen, which he called to congratulate him, and that was kind of a first. But going into his second inauguration, there were some questions about what Taiwan-US relations would look like under the second Trump administration. So we were looking for signs of, well, are there going to be more forward developments while the speaker's here in Washington, D.C.? And their plans got complicated, the delegation. So what happened was, it was so cold, Trump moved the inauguration from outdoors to indoors. And that basically meant the number of people who could attend the ceremony was just drastically cut. And that also affected the plans of the Taiwan delegation. And I think back at home, there was this even more anxiety that people were asking, well, if Taiwan's cut from the inauguration, what does that mean for US-Taiwan ties even further?
So people trying to read the tea leaves early on. Now, you mentioned the phone call that President Tsai Ing-wen had with Trump, but this time around there was no phone call between Trump and current President Ching-te. Did you make anything of that at the moment, Brian?
So it's a good question because particularly there were some hopes in Taiwan that there would be a similar phone call with Lai, and that's why there was so much attention to the inauguration. It shows to what extent Taiwan is important or not important for the second Trump administration. And I think going in, there were a lot of anxieties. Times it was Trump or people that work with him attacked Taiwan on the issue of semiconductors. Or there was the lingering fear that Trump would unpredictably make a deal with Xi Jinping. And that's another fear that persisted from the first term.
Now, one of the biggest impacts of the Trump presidency on Taiwan was the sweeping global tariffs. They initially imposed 32% on Taiwanese goods, but later revised that figure down to 20%. And as of recording day, we are still expecting the two sides to continue negotiations. And what's notable, the new tariffs do not cover Taiwan's top export, semiconductors. Taiwanese chip-making giant TSMC made headlines early in the year, pledging to bankroll over $100 billion into chip manufacturing in Arizona, now considered the largest foreign direct investment in U.S. history. I want to know, Brian, what was the reaction here in Taiwan to the announcement from TSMC that they were going to be investing so heavily in the United States?
Yeah, there was concern about this investment going way back before it increased to such an even more substantial extent because of this concern that Taiwan would give away the trade secrets that allow TSMC to maintain this market dominance, because it is thought that this keeps the world invested in Taiwan for defense because Taiwan produces the world's semiconductors. China itself is deterred from attacking because of dependency on Taiwan as well. And so the US is talking a lot these days about the need to bring back these industries that have been taken away, such as the semiconductor industry. And that's why it did provoke a lot of alarm and fighting within domestic politics about the fab construction.
Yeah, we're talking about, of course, the silicon shield is what people were calling it. This idea that having the highest level of chips created here in Taiwan was going to actually protect Taiwan from being attacked. Now, Taiwan's President Ching-te has taken a strong line on China this year. During a national security meeting in March, he described China as engaging in, quote, division, destruction, and subversion against Taiwan.
面对日益严峻的威胁，政府不会停止努力，全力确保国家主权不受侵害，确保2300万人民的自由、民主和生活方式永续如常。
He went further, saying China's actions meet the definition of a foreign hostile force under Taiwan's laws. Brian, what do you make of this language? Is this his toughest stance to date?
It's interesting because there was some pushback regarding those comments. There is, of course, the framing from the KMT that Lai is overly provocative of China, and that through such comments, he's creating an enemy when he should instead be reaching across the political aisle. But it does appear that Lai is very interested in raising greater awareness or alarm about the threats presented in Taiwanese society, both domestically and externally in terms of military threats.
Now, Leslie, do you think when he was speaking, that Lai was speaking, the message was aimed at China or to people here in Taiwan?
I think it was aimed at people here in Taiwan. As Brian said, Lai is very interested in raising awareness about what China is doing in the hostilities. And that said, I think Beijing has a very clear idea of what Lai thinks of them. So I think him saying that was nothing new to the leadership over there in China. So I think it was definitely more of an appeal to the Taiwanese people to say, hey, China is acting this way to us and it's not friendly.
Now, Taiwan has also responded to increasing military threats from China by expanding the scale of its annual war games. Hanguang 41 was Taiwan's biggest military exercise in terms of scale and intensity. They not only featured Taiwan's newest weapons systems, they also combined military and civil defense drills using realistic invasion scenarios. We showed images in our newscast of the military moving equipment through the Taipei metro system. You know, I've been here in Taiwan for 30 years. I don't think I've ever seen that sort of image in my entire time here. Was that a surprise to you?
That was a surprise to me in that those images were really fresh and new. But one thing that Taiwan has been doing, as you said, is increasing its defense spending, and it wants to make its trainings a little bit more realistic, what a scenario might look like during an invasion time. And using the subway as a logistical transport hub, whether you're transporting supplies or people, is a very realistic thing that might happen. You have that system, a comprehensive, transportation system, you might as well use it.
Now, the Lai administration is also vowing to boost defense spending to up to 5% of Taiwan's GDP. But Lai Ching-te, the president, he's facing an uphill battle in the legislature. What do you make of his push and kind of the pushback that he's getting?
Yeah, so this occurs on several fronts. One is that it is a demand from the Trump administration for Lai to boost defense spending. And so I think there's also this pushback against that this is a demand from the US. But in the meantime, there's also this concern from some political parties, for example, that preparing for war will bring on war, and that defense spending and any increase, or these drills, which you do see in everyday life now, including drills conducted in PX marts, or these handbooks that are being passed around and distributed by the government for civil defense, then that this becomes contentious. And I think there will be the pushback that occurs, particularly from the pan-blue camp, that defense spending increases will lead China to increase in tit-for-tat escalation.
This year, we also saw a string of high-profile draft dodging cases, and of course, any conversation about the military needs to include this as well. How did the public respond to those draft dodging cases? Is there concern that the younger generation is lukewarm to defending Taiwan?
Since as long as I can remember, reception to the conscription service among people is just that it's kind of a waste of time. It's a way to kind of waste a year once you get out of college. But I think that's because conscription wasn't taken seriously. We saw with Tsai during her second administration, she really kind of upped the conscription game. She moved it from 4 months to a year, and then she also increased the pay scale of the conscriptees. And I think the high-profile draft dodging cases is kind of the administration's way of showing, hey, it doesn't matter who you are, you do have this obligation and you need to fulfill it. And I think that's why they actually went after kind of public figures, because they're saying, like I said, it doesn't matter who you are, you don't get special treatment, you got to defend the country.
A long-standing question about Taiwan's security is whether the US would come to Taiwan's defense if China were to attack. Now, President Trump did not answer that question, but he did say something about his interactions with Chinese President Xi Jinping, and his comments turned heads here in Taiwan.
They understand what's going to happen, and he has openly said, and his people have openly said at meetings, we would never do anything while President Trump is president, because they know the consequences.
Now, Trump was speaking after his meeting with Xi in Seoul, but he also said there was no mention of Taiwan in their discussions. Now, how did his comments go over in Taiwan?
So it's interesting because there are a lot of different reads on this. One is that they put this issue aside because it's not their focus at present. Another interpretation is they just didn't have time in their very brief meeting to talk about Taiwan. And another view altogether was that then this is actually good because it didn't come up. We don't know how it would have gone if they had said something unpredictable about Taiwan. And so I think we can read a lot into this meeting, or it could have just been too short. We don't know, in fact.
Global recognition is really important for Taiwan, being able to participate in international affairs. Can you talk a little bit about Taiwan's participation in some of the global news events that we've seen this year, particularly in light of the current situation between China and Japan?
It's very surprising to see Taiwan become a point of contention between two other countries, and in this case, Japan and China. And this being that after comments in the past by former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe that a Taiwan crisis would be a crisis also for Japan, the current Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi said that it could be an existential threat for Japan if there was an attack on Taiwan. And now we've seen then China suspend imports from Japan, tourism. We also have drones sent near disputed islands. And in this way, Taiwan has also used this as an opportunity to build ties with Japan. For example, Lai Ching-te eating sushi from Japan as a show of support.
Leslie, have you seen Taiwan's participation in these sorts of international discussions on the increase in 2025?
Absolutely. I think Taiwan's having a big moment right now. Taiwan is more featured in more headlines than ever. People are becoming more aware of the situation in the Taiwan Strait. And I do think that Taiwan's going to leverage this moment to make sure that it gets as much exposure as possible, because that's what Taiwan likes to do. We always think that we're kind of in the shadows over here, but now's our moment in the spotlight, and it's the time to capitalize.
Up ahead on Correspondents, another turbulent year in domestic politics in Taiwan, a historic mass recall vote ending in a stunning defeat. Plus, triumphs. Tragedies and glimmers of hope in 2025, a year that tested Taiwan's resilience.
In the face of adversity, the power of truth.
A roadmap for a just and open world, charted by the freest country in Asia.
For TaiwanPlus.
TaiwanPlus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.
Welcome back to Correspondents on TaiwanPlus. Today we're looking back at the biggest moments of 2025. This year, Taiwan witnessed one of the biggest attempted mass recalls of lawmakers in modern history. Civic groups launched an unprecedented move to recall roughly a quarter of the nation's legislators, all from the opposition. But all of those recall attempts failed. It was a stunning defeat that led to a shakeup in the president's cabinet and a change of leadership within the ruling Democratic Progressive Party. Now, Leslie, you are our lead local politics reporter, and on the night before the vote, you were actually at a rally against the recall movement and in support of lawmakers from the main opposition party, the Kuomintang or Ching-te. Tell us about that night.
So leading up to that rally, I think the recall camp had a lot of momentum. You saw on the news that the recall camp, they were able to fly through the first and second stages of the petition to recall the lawmakers. And not only that, but you also saw that the opposition, they tried to counter with their own recall campaign, and those recall campaigns failed. So when we got there, it wasn't a lot of people there. But towards the end, there were a lot of people there, far more than I anticipated. But it was definitely interesting, and there was a point during the night where I saw the atmosphere there, and I was thinking, oh wow, this recall might really not go the way of, what the recallers want.
Brian, for you, as you're watching this, did you anticipate that the recall motions would fail?
I didn't actually. It was very surprising because both political parties were in fact saying that they expected there to be successful recalls. And so in retrospect, maybe the defeat is not so surprising because these were districts that voted for the KMT last time around. But the momentum did surprise me, though I did see the momentum slowing in the months before the actual recall vote.
So why do you think that they failed? I mean, was it a sign of support for lawmakers, or did people, object to the use of a recall so early in these lawmakers' terms in office? What do you think, Brian?
I think it is all of those things. I think particularly when you're launching a recall campaign, it's not a choice between two faces. It's whether do you want this person to stay in office or not. And many people, I think they felt that this was actually infringing on the rules of the game for elections. And so there was some pushback there. Campaigns, for example, were very negative as well. And that's always a debate in elections. Do you focus on attacking your opponent or building up your platform? But in this case, you're only trying to get rid of somebody. So there's that negativity, and I think it turns some people off.
Now, the KMT, which historically supports closer ties with Beijing, went on to elect a new leader. They chose former lawmaker Zheng Liwen.
我们绝对不能够让台湾成为麻烦制造者，我们也绝对不让台湾沦为地缘政治的牺牲品。中国国民党会担起责任，积极地为区域和平做一个和平的缔造者。
Brian, can you tell us a little bit about Zheng, what kind of a person she is and what we can expect from the KMT moving forward?
So Zheng has made a lot of headlines lately with controversial statements, including, for example, hoping that she desired to see Taiwanese proud to be Chinese, or that Russian President Vladimir Putin is a democratically elected leader, and that Ukraine provoked Russia into a defensive war through closer ties with NATO. And she's quite an interesting character because she is not a newcomer to politics, but she was not very prominent until this very meteoric rise to national attention in the case of the KMT chair election. This is not the first time this has happened, but now she's dominating headlines.
The big question for her election is going to be defense spending, whether or not she supports increasing Taiwan's defense budget. She has, during her campaign, said she doesn't support it, but at the same time, this is something that the US is going to put pressure on. And we saw a few days ago that the representative from the US to Taiwan met with Zheng Liwen, and they wondered if defense was discussed. Neither side gave an affirmative or a negative, but at the same time, this is going to be the big issue for the KMT, at least from the US perspective moving forward.
Now, one of the most dramatic moments of the year for Taiwan came in September. A typhoon triggered the collapse of a massive barrier lake, one of the biggest in the world. Millions of tons of muddy water surged through the communities below, causing widespread damage and killing 19. Now, Brian, what lessons are we learning from the Guangfu flooding?
So there's talk of increased disaster preparedness and how that is necessary. But we also do see this usual fight between the local and central government about resources, about who is responsible for what after the flooding. And so that also shows how, in case of disasters, they're very quickly politicized in Taiwan. And we're seeing that in the aftermath of the flooding.
Now, Leslie, one of the things that we saw after the flooding destroyed these communities is that people from all over Taiwan came in to help out. Can you talk a little bit about this spirit of volunteerism?
Taiwanese people have absolutely no shortage of compassion, and this was on full display during these volunteers just going into Guangfu to help shovel mud away. President Ching-te did mobilize the military to help up with cleanup efforts, but we saw tens of thousands of volunteers go to Guangfu of their own volition and just start helping out. And then you also had business owners who were donating goods like boots, gloves, and also shovels. And I think this is just a way to show people in Taiwan they can unite in times of crisis very, very easily. Taiwanese people will go out of their way and risk their own well-being to help out the other person.
Now, I have one more defining moment from 2025 that I want to share, a powerful symbol of Taiwan's unshakable spirit. Of course, I'm talking about the young baseball players from Dongyuan Elementary School who clinched the Little League World Series title in August. It was Taiwan's first win in nearly 3 decades. So Leslie, you also sit on our sports desk. Why was this such a big moment for Taiwan?
Taiwan has long been known for its prowess in baseball, particularly junior Little League baseball. This was the 18th title that Taiwan won, but it was the first time that we won in 29 years. So this was definitely a return to form, and this comes off the heels of Taiwan winning its first elite men's level baseball tournament during the Premier 12. Taiwan has always been competitive in baseball, but it never really could close the deal when it came to the big moments. And we just saw Taiwan win these tournaments back to back. And it's just like saying, well, Taiwan's really found its stride again, and it might become a baseball powerhouse once again.
I think anytime Taiwan wins something on the international stage, it's huge, huge news here in Taiwan. It's like it's a national celebration that happens. For these Little League baseball players, we saw a parade in the streets of the capital when they came back, people welcoming them and celebrating that. So final question today, what's the one moment of 2025 that you will remember years from now, Brian?
So I think for me it is actually the recall campaign, because although it was not successful, it was historically unprecedented. There are many stories I think that are quite surprising. For example, for votes in which it seemed like they would not reach the benchmark, there were people that would be going on the high-speed rail with one vote to carry the paperwork. And then the next vote, someone else would take the HSR. And so it points to the energy, I think, that Taiwanese democracy often has, even when outcomes, you never know how it'll turn out. And that's also part of democracy.
In the same vein, I want to say it's the election of Zheng Liwen as the new KMT head, because Brian mentioned she had a very meteoric rise. It was very sudden. And the KMT is the main opposition party, and though they sit in the opposition, they also hold a lot of influence over Taiwan's politics. So I think her taking the reins as the new KMT chair is going to mark a pivot for Taiwan's politics in the long term, especially at this time when the KMT holds a majority in conjunction with the Taiwan People's Party in the legislature.
Don't forget, we have local elections coming up in 2026, so this could actually have an impact on that. On that note, big thanks to Brian Hioe and Leslie Liao. It's been a pleasure speaking to you both. If you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to the Correspondents playlist to see all of our episodes. For Correspondents, I'm Andrew Ryan. We'll see you next time.